me, what I was really trying to do was to produce the unexpected and try to find a way to make the computer do something which I hadn't told it to do.
Scott Draves, in addition to being my husband and my inspiration for starting Lisa in the first place, is a pioneering software artist, best known for creating the Electric Sheep, a collective intelligence consisting of 500,000 computers and people all over the world. It uses mathematics and genetic algorithms to create an infinite abstract animation. And his work is in collections worldwide, including the Carnegie Mellon School of Computer Science, the 21C Museum Hotel, private collections, Google, the Simons Center for Geometry and Physics, and MIAC. And his clients range from Skrillex to the Adler Planetarium in Chicago. Scott has a BS in mathematics from Brown and a PhD in computer science from Carnegie Mellon University for a thesis on metaprogramming for media processing. And this is Scott Draves.
Whenever I make art, I sign it Scott Draves and the Electric Sheep. And that's because the things that I do are not made by just me personally working, by myself in the studio, but actually by me and a worldwide network of collaborators and computers. I was born in 1968, and I think I started programming in 1978. So about age 10, I encountered computers and really fell in love, and taught myself to program just by doing it. By reading books, by literally hitting reset on the computer and going into the debug mode of what's called the monitor of the computer, and sort of seeing how the games were written. I was working on these mathematical algorithms and eventually produced this image, or actually a collection of images, of which this was one. And I showed them to my teacher, my advisor, my boss, and he was like, "Wow, that looks great. I've never seen anything like it. You should send it to this art competition, the Pre-Ars Electronica." And I had never heard of that. I didn't really consider myself an artist. I wasn't really making art. But it was a long process, but ultimately the good news is I got a prize, and then I realized, oh, this is art. It's not something that only I like. There's other people out there in the world who are doing this, and so I started learning a lot more about it and pursuing it with a much more intentional process. I wanted to find a way to produce things that had like subtlety and sort of smokiness, and the sort of the beauty and variety that could be found in nature, not just sort of the hard mechanical computer graphics style. Instead of producing the artwork by drawing lines and curves using the metaphor of the brush, the flame algorithm works by solving a mathematical equation. This is actually what it's working with, and how they're made sort of inside. And what I really want to sort of point out here is that S is the image, the solution, and it's defined in terms of a transformation of itself. And that's where sort of the recursive nature of it comes from, the recursive nature of the image. And that actually sort of, I think, mirrors our own sort of human natures and our consciousnesses and our models. We, as a thinking person, I have sort of a model of myself inside my head. And so I think sort of consciousness and our sort of social consciousness is actually very similar to the mathematics that I used to make the art. By 1999, that was like the sort of the starting point for the Electric Sheep, where I went from working on one computer to realizing I needed to tap into thousands of computers all over the internet. And so the Electric Sheep is actually a screensaver that anybody can download onto their regular PC. And then all the computers that are running the software work together as a supercomputer to create the art. The genetic codes combine to form child images. and it uses the crossover algorithm, which is the same one, the same algorithmic process that our genes use to produce children. It's just another sort of example of the kind of thing produced by the electric sheep. I got really into open source software in the 80s just by using it, and then reading about the philosophy and the legal structure of how it worked. And here's an example of the evolutionary trees in the electric sheep. Over time, there have been a lot of electric sheep produced, and so the project has been running continuously since 1999. The most beneficial, or the most interesting sort of result of open source is not sort of getting those things that you want, but finding out the things that you didn't know that you wanted, or the unexpected things that people do with the code. And so there was a guy who took my sort of command line algorithm and built a sort of easy to use point and click user interface around it. So that's not something that I wanted, but it turned out it was something that a lot of other people wanted. And there's lots of artists who use this software now to make their own artwork. And it's actually, they can just print it out themselves or email it to their friends. But also what they can do is they can take a design and upload it to the electric sheep server. Here, this is a show in Hungary where it's projected on all walls and surfaces. People can go into it. This is 25 high-def projectors. This is a more traditional museum setting, but a party in a museum. And this is in Moscow. This is in a gallery in Williamsburg. And this is a close-up of the computer showing where I really tried to make it more of a sculptural element. You can see it back here. You can see the computer mounted above the screen. And it's important to me to, again, to sort of distance myself from the idea of watching television. And so part of how I do that is by putting a frame around the screen. And so it doesn't look, once you put a frame around it, then it's art. And this gives just a couple of examples of other artists who are using my algorithm to make their own stuff. And then I started making fine art by going through all the designs that the screensaver makes, picking out the few that I find truly beautiful, and then redoing them in much higher quality, much higher resolution, and sort of editing them and assembling them, and making fine art that's collectible and has an aesthetic quality that works in the museum setting. That's just like an overview of my process, and so it's time for Q&A now. I'd be happy to hear your thoughts or your reactions or your questions about all of this.